Kia ora, welcome to Women Power. This week we're talking about why there are so few women at the top of our businesses and law firms. The numbers of women board members and law firm partners in New Zealand remain pitifully small. Since 1993, more women than men have been admitted as lawyers, and women now comprise 61% of law graduates. But men still comprise 78% of partners in law firms. Just 36% of judges are women, and only 15% of Queen's Counsel are female. 80% of our Court of Appeal judges are men, and 79% of High Court judges are male. Britain's most senior judge, Lord Neuberger, said in March this year that the stereotypical image of judges as male and white might be so deeply entrenched that there could be unconscious bias against women. He accepted that there was a problem with lack of diversity in the higher judiciary and said he was keen to address it. The previous month, 3 new male judges were appointed to the United Kingdom Supreme Court, bringing it up to its full complement of 12 and meaning that only 1 of the 12 is female. The Auckland Women Lawyers Association has commissioned research into the low number of female partners in large law firms. I'm joined now by AWLA President Angela Henson and Dr. Judith Pringle from AUT to discuss this further. Kia ora, Angela, welcome to the program.
Kia ora, Katrina.
And kia ora, Judith, welcome.
Kia ora, Katrina.
Why are there still so few women partners in large law firms?
Well, it's an excellent question. We know that although there are a large number of women who are coming into the legal profession, and in fact more so than men, that they're still not featuring as partners within the firms at the same rate. And so what we're trying to understand is the reasons for that. We know that there are a number of assumptions that are made about that, which includes things like women who are choosing to do that and choosing to take on family responsibilities instead of going on and progressing in their career. Some people suggest it's because women have decided that they don't want to put in the hard hours and the hard work to make a business case for getting into partnership. But there are a number of assumptions out there, but we don't think those are the entire answer as to why women aren't making it through to partnership.
And the lack of female partners, is that more a problem in large law firms, or is it just a problem in small law firms, or do we not really know the answer to that?
Overall, the statistics are quite bad, regardless of what firm you're in. The statistics are definitely looking worse in the bigger firms, and it does seem that since 1993, when the statistics started changing, when women started to come into the profession at a higher rate than men, that despite that, regardless of the firms that they're in, they're still not making it to partnership at the same rate.
So it seems that this is not actually going to change just through the passage of time, which is what we were told for quite a long time.
Well, you'd hope that that was the case. You would hope that because we're getting far more women coming into the profession that would happen. It would reflect the numbers and reflect the statistics. But the reality, it's just not happening that way. And I think part of the reason for that may be a perception that the women have about their inability to get into partnership. And that may just be that the firms aren't giving them enough reason to believe that it's possible for them to do that.
And is this just a problem in New Zealand for women, or is the position pretty similar in other countries?
Well, I think Judith probably knows quite a lot about the statistics overseas.
I can bore you with statistics, but basically compared to countries we normally compare ourselves with, like Australia, UK, US, the story's much the same. Around 45% of lawyers are women, and partners, that seems to be stuck around just under 20%, 15, 17, 19.
I was overseas last year at the Australian Women Lawyers Conference, and in New South Wales in particular, I know they're doing research in a similar sort of way to what we're doing in New Zealand, because they're concerned about the issues too.
And can you tell us about the research that the Auckland Women Lawyers Association is doing, and that you're actually carrying it out?
Absolutely. No, well, it's talking specifically to people who are experienced in the large law firms, and it's Auckland based, even though they may have branches elsewhere or in Australia. And we're interested in people, I call it below the line and above the line, people who are 6 years past qualification but not yet partner. And then we have a second phase of the study, which is people who are partners as well. Another strand to it is to get the official line from the law firm, so we're also talking to people who know the HR and the policies.
And what's the reason for doing the research? I guess Angela's explained some of it. From your point of view, what do you think the value of it will be?
Well, we always hope to change the world, and that's certainly the
Good
focus.
aim.
Thank you. But certainly this pattern of women not being in senior positions is through corporates, all the service firms, professions. It's a well-trodden path, and we have a lot of research, but not specifically in New Zealand. And I think one of the interesting things is to get a bit more complex too, away from some of the common assumptions that Angela was talking about earlier.
And specifically, who's taking part in the research?
Well, there's three parts to it actually. I'll leap to that. We do an online survey first, and that is for people who are not yet partner, but 6 years past qualification. We've had a very good response to that, 140 people, which is, you know, around 50% of all possible women. But
That's
also
really
men
good.
have answered as well, you know, which we're delighted with. So that's one phase of it. The second phase then is to get volunteers from this group who are happy to be interviewed about their experiences and career aspirations. And then the next part of the study, which we're just wrapping, I hope, at the moment, is talking to women partners, females who have made it, if you like, and also a managing partner or CEO in every large law firm. So we find out what's happening.
And have you been hearing some interesting things without asking you to give too much away?
Well, I guess one of the things that we're hot on, and we must be, is confidentiality and anonymity. Otherwise, no one would be talking to us. But wonderful, rich stories. People have been very open and generous with their time, and also just what's been going on for them. And I guess I can say that we have different perspectives coming through. You know, there's no one clear story. So that we love that. We love the complexity.
And was it hard getting the funding for the research?
It's fair to say it wasn't an easy job at all. One of the things that we've encountered when we've gone out and talked to organisations about the possibility of getting funding is the fact that people perceive that they already know what the answer is, so what's the point in actually undertaking the research? There are perceptions out there that, as I said before, people just assume that women make a choice not to go through into partnership. The response that we've received from some firms has been, we do enough work on our own to identify the issues, we already know what's going on, and so there's no real need to bother with this. But we don't think that's enough. I mean, if the firms did know what the issues were, there wouldn't be the statistics that we now see.
And when will the research be completed?
That's always the question, isn't it? We've closed the survey. We're in the middle of analysis of people who are not yet partner in terms of the interview transcripts, the piles we have. And we're just finishing the final interviews with people who are partners. You know. So early next year is our aim and our goal, and our partners, the AWLA, we're looking to deliver to them early in the year.
And has there been international interest in the research that's going on?
Well, it's early days, I must admit. We did present some preliminary findings last month at Griffith University in Brisbane, and there was a researcher there who's done work in the 80s and 90s, so we have an interesting longitudinal face to it. But there's 6 of us in the research team, and some of us will be presenting this work in England, we hope, mid-year. So there's international publication at the moment, this year and both last year, in the sorts of places we read, so it's a kind of hot topic.
And how does AWLA plan to use the research?
We're hoping that the results will give us some understanding of what the root cause is for this issue, so that we can then use those results to be able to tailor some services towards our members to try and fix these problems, and if necessary go out to the firms and lobby them to try and come up with ways in which that this situation can be improved.
Because it's not just the lack of women becoming partners, it's also the huge number of women who actually leave the profession entirely that hasn't really been explored properly or dealt with, has it?
That's right, and we're hoping that this research will help to identify some of the reasons for why women are leaving the profession. I mean, the reality is the statistics are really stark. So we don't have, in terms of looking at the profession as a whole, we don't have as many female judges as we do men. Same is true of partnership levels and also with Queen's Counsel. So there really is a problem here. We just don't understand precisely what's causing it.
And how important do both of you think that mentoring might be? I mean, could that be part of a solution, a small part of it?
I think Angela should go first.
Well, Auckland Women Lawyers Association holds a mentoring program. That's something that we've had in place for a number of years, and what we try to do is facilitate mentoring within younger members of the profession, so that there's someone that they can come to when they have concerns with career advancement and things. That seems to be working very well, and for whatever reason this year there has been a really big increase in the number of women who are seeking to have mentors. I think mentoring, I'm a mentor myself, I've got 3 mentees, and it's a fantastic opportunity for more senior women to get involved in the progression of young women through the profession, to give them ideas and understandings and a bit of a reality check about their profession, about their progression within their own firms, to identify any issues and to give them the right support. But I think there's also a need to have mentors within these big firms. Women partners in particular are critical to ensuring that female partners are coming through the ranks. So I think mentoring is vital to address this issue.
Thanks, Angela, and thank you, Judith. Now it's time for the Woman Power Fails and Woman Power Wins. The Woman Power Fail this week goes to our government. The women of Aotearoa are waiting to hear what steps you're going to take to address sexual violence against women. So far, there's been a deafening silence in terms of substantive action. We're not stupid. We understand perfectly well that the public comments which have been made by ministers represent just tinkering around the edges. There has been no announcement of a concerted plan or any major action, despite many reports with detailed recommendations still waiting to be put into force. The Woman Power win this week goes to Auckland mother Jessie Hume, who last week presented a 110,000 signature petition at Parliament calling for action over the Roastbusters sexual assaults and better funding of services for sexual assault victims in Aotearoa. Ms Hume's petition is unprecedented in New Zealand in gaining such a huge level of support in only 3 weeks. She is mother to a 14-month-old son, Ames, who accompanied her to Parliament. She's calling on Prime Minister John Key to act, describing the number of Kiwis affected by sexual assault as a national health crisis. Only 11% of positions on NZX-listed company boards are held by women. Once multiple directorships are removed, only 50 women actually sit on the boards. This means that the average number of women per board is 0.8%. 63% of listed companies outside Auckland and Wellington have no female board members at all. The 25% group is calling for 25% female directors by 2015. To talk more about this, I'm joined by Gayatri Jadaram and Deborah Chantry. Kia ora, Gayatri, welcome to the program.
Kia ora, Katrina. I'm Gayatri, as Katrina says. I'm a lawyer, and I'm also on the board of a few not-for-profit organisations, including the New Zealand Shareholders Association.
Welcome. And Deborah, kia ora, welcome to you.
Kia ora, thank you very much for having me.
Why are there so few women on New Zealand boards?
Well, there are a number of reasons why. Firstly, there's the Old Boys Network that's still there and ripe. There's also gender stereotyping. So when we think CEOs, we all think, well, not us, but we think males. Also, there are higher competency levels for women as opposed to men. For example, women are required to be directors of boards, of previous boards, whether they be not-for-profit or private companies, before they can get on to publicly listed companies. If you look at the boards of publicly listed companies in New Zealand, a lot of them don't have that requirement. So there's higher competency levels for women to get onto boards.
And are the numbers of women on New Zealand boards increasing or not really?
They are, but it's very slow. I mean, I looked at some figures earlier on, and in 2006 there was about 7.13% of women, and in 2012 only 14.75%. So it's a very, very slow increase.
And why is it important to have women on boards?
I think it's about diversity as a whole, and I think that women offer a slightly different way of viewing things, a different way of approaching certain problems. And I think as a board it's really important to make an informed decision. You need to have lots of different viewpoints to actually help inform that decision. And also, if you think about it, from a board point of view, your customers are also very diverse. So your women are actually representative of who your customers are.
For example, in the US, a study was done with 80% of women make the decisions on consumer products. So hence, they say it's really important to have women on those boards because they make decisions. They understand the customer more in those environments. And again, as you mentioned, diversity of thought and experience. I mean, studies have shown that those boards that have women on their boards are good for governance, etc., etc. It's just a necessary thing to have.
Absolutely.
And what steps are being taken in New Zealand to try and increase the number of women on boards?
In New Zealand, now I'm going to talk about the publicly listed companies here. Institute of Directors have, I think a year ago now, have introduced what they call, sorry, I've lost my train of thought here. I'll have to go back on that one.
They introduced a mentoring for
mentoring
program.
That's right. The mentoring, which is modelled off the Australian model. And what happens there is that they choose, or women have to apply for that, but they have to be women that have already had board experience. So the level's quite high to get into it, and they're mentored by publicly listed company chair or other senior directors. So they must be directors. So the level's quite high to actually get onto that mentoring scheme. And then there's the 25% group that was formed in July last year, and they're very, very active, and what they're trying to do is get 25% women on boards by 2015, I think. And there's Ministry of Women's Affairs, which is for states. They keep an eye on the state sector boards as well. And those are the few things that have been happening in New Zealand.
And there's a few more informal ones as well, like Professional and Women on Boards, and they're all about the support and the networks for women. And I think one of the key reasons we don't have as many women on boards is that lack of self-confidence. We're perfectionists. We look at a job description and we say we don't meet it 100%. Should I really apply for this? Whereas men will go, I meet 50%, I'll apply for it. And so we need those informal support networks as well, where you can actually go and talk to other women in similar positions who can actually help you understand that actually you're a pretty smart lady and you should be doing this.
And are we doing most of the things that are being done overseas to increase the numbers of women, or are there still some other things that we should be doing?
There's obviously quotas overseas, and I think that's something that is being talked about over here. I see pros and cons in having quotas. I think it certainly increases diversity without a doubt, but I wonder if it makes us think, do I deserve this position? Should I really be here? And conversely, do men start to think, does this woman deserve to be here, or is she here because of a quota?
For example, NZX released their gender diversity rule last year. And that, to me, I see it as a quota system, because companies only have to report percentages. Year to date, at the moment, it's 11%. Their figures have just been released for November. In Australia and the UK, they have a different model, and what they say, well, not only do you have to have, what percentage of women are on boards, but you've got to have measurable a policy. it's compulsory. You've got to have a policy, and you've got to have measurable objectives, and you've actually got to state yearly how those objectives have met your policy. In New Zealand, unfortunately, we don't have that at the moment. We just have, and that actually brings, you know, obviously it's a problem with tokenism, and we'll just get a woman on a board and then we've done enough. So we need to go further here in New Zealand, absolutely.
Especially there was some research we did just recently where it actually showed that of the NZX, 54% don't have any women on the boards yet at all. So it's still a huge chunk of businesses that haven't got that at all.
And it's not only women who are in short supply, it's anyone non-Pākehā as well, because it's not just that it's overwhelmingly men, it's overwhelmingly white men, isn't it?
That's correct, yeah.
Well, Sky Cities, if you look at Sky City, look at their board, they've got one woman, admittedly, but most of their majority of their customers are Asian, yet there's no Asian that sits on that board, which is interesting. And I think if we compared the overseas models where they have diversity in the broader sense, not just gender, whereas NZX listing rule is on gender only, we really do need to branch out before we get diversity across the board, because it isn't just gender, there's other aspects as well.
And again, it comes down to confidence. I do a lot of work with the Pacific Board Trust, and the non-Pākehā are even less likely to put their hand up and say, I'm ready for this. So it's again, how do we support, encourage, and get them thinking about it.
Yeah. Are you optimistic that the numbers of women and non-Pākehā people are going to increase in the reasonably near future, or do you think that as Gayatri was saying, that we actually need to take firmer steps as they're doing overseas?
I think it's slow and steady. I think if we want it to be any faster, we're going to have to make some quite drastic changes.
Yes, no, I agree with that. It's slow. In the US, they've got a group, 2020 it's called, and they are expecting 20% by 2020, which is, it seems quite realistic actually. But Australia, they've got the 30% club, and they're looking at 30% by 2015. But their progress, because we've started a bit later with our with this, so Australia, UK, and other overseas companies are probably about 3 years ahead of us. And I'm optimistic again, but I think for publicly listed companies, as I said before, I think we do really need to look at the NZX's model in terms of reporting and the mandatory requirement on having diversity policies, because I think that's when we're going to get more impact in that regard.
Thanks, Gayatri, and thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
Now it's time for News of the Week. The United Kingdom and Holland boast the highest proportion of female law firm partners in Europe, but the figure is only 16%. 2/3 of female lawyers say that their gender is a barrier to success. Spain has the lowest proportion of female partners at just 3%. In Germany, 9.6% of partners are women, and in France the figure is 13%. The Canadian Catalyst Accord is calling for action by Canadian corporations to increase the overall proportion of Financial Post 500 board seats held by women to 25% by 2017. 2011 research showed that the proportion of women on Canadian boards rose by only half a percentage point between 2009 and 2011. Women currently hold just 14.5% of board seats in FP 500 companies and 10.3% in public companies. The United Kingdom's Women on Boards organisation has now been operating for a year and plans to step up activities in the coming 12 months. More than 700 women have now attended Getting Started and On Track for Success workshops, which aim to provide pathways to the boardroom or senior leadership. Early in 2014, Women on Boards plans to introduce 3 masterclasses and launch a Find a Mentor service modelled on a successful program already running in Australia. Almost 2,000 calls have been received in the first 5 months of operation of the Samoa Victim Support Group's 24-hour helpline service. The advent of the helpline is credited with saving lives, improving access to counselling for domestic violence victims, and encouraging witnesses to speak out. The Labour Party's Shadow Minister for Women estimates that up to 50,000 women are forced out of their jobs because of pregnancy discrimination. The number of women who believe they experience so-called soft discrimination in the form of being sidelined and having their careers stall is much higher. Labour plans to strengthen anti-discrimination laws by closing loopholes and providing extra training for women returning to work. As a result of violence and neglect, there are 50 million fewer women in Southeast Asia today than there should be. In Papua New Guinea, an average of 70% of women have experienced violence. More than 60% of Pacific countries have no laws prohibiting violence against women. A national study on domestic violence against women in Tonga, released in 2012, found that as many as 3 out of 4 women had experienced physical or sexual violence. However, until now, there has been no law criminalising domestic violence or establishing prompt police safety and protection orders or prevention measures. But all 17 of Tonga's MPs have now voted in favour of a family protection bill to address the issues. Now it's time for this week's 5 action points. Support the recommendations which emerge from AWLA's research. Instruct women lawyers when you have legal work. Become a mentor to assist younger women. Support the goal of 25% women directors by 2015. Use consumer power to support companies which promote women. That's our program for this week. Join us next week when we look at the position of women in other countries and what the women of Aotearoa can do to help their sisters overseas. We'll talk to former Chief Human Rights Commissioner Rosalind Noonan about the work she's doing overseas. We'll also speak to Dr. Aseel Russell, who has set up her own charity to provide medical and dental care to women and children in Iraq. Thanks for watching. Ka kite anō.